click or hold and aim. That's what you do in O's, and I guess I can speak for most people when I say what got us initially interested in the game was probably a clip like this. Holy shit, what's going on here? How good is this player? This looks insane. But is it? Well, I conducted an in-depth investigation to find out. I collected and analyzed data from over 20,000 players just to find out how good the average player is. I found a mathematical function which you can use to predict your future skill level, and I even developed a whole browser extension just for this video. So let's get into it. Other games make the answer to this question quite simple. You got a bunch of different ranks and usually they are normally distributed. That means the average is around the middle, and then the further you get to the extremes, the less players there are. O's, however, is not quite so simple. First, our ranks consist of a literal number showing where you place in the world rankings. This means that the rank distribution would look somewhat like this. Now, looking at the middle does give us the average rank of a player, but it doesn't give us the average skill level. A much better metric to use would be PP, which means performance points. Fully explaining PP is beyond the scope of this video, but all you really need to know is that it's an approximate representation of your skill level and also determines your rank. So how do we get the average PP value? Easy, just take the sum of all players' PP and then divide it by the number of players. But how do we get the PP from all players? It's like I can just manually go through all 24 million of them, right? Fortunately, also something called an API, which gives us the ratios directly asked the server. Basically, we ask the server, insert hacker sounds, whoa, and then we get a response, which we could somehow try to put into a Google or Excel sheet so we can analyze it. One problem, however, there's a shit ton of players, which means I need to make a shit ton of requests to the server, and Peppy, the lead developer of O's, would probably not be very happy about that. Now what I could do instead is just request a smaller sample set consisting of like 10,000 random players, which should hopefully be enough to somewhat accurately represent the entirety of the player base. And turns out, by sheer coincidence, that dataset already exists, and we can get it from the source, Peppy, with just a simple click. No need to... Whoa. Important to mention, I did have to ask Peppy for permission to use this dataset, or at least to publicize it, because, well, that's what the license said. So I wrote like a 300 word long email, fully prepared for him to say no, and he did say no. Worries. What we have now is an SQL file, which means I need to do quite a few steps before I can get this into Google Sheets. There we go. So now we can get the average PP value like this, 548. That currently corresponds to a rank of about 1.05 million. This is it. What you're watching right now is peak average gameplay. Wow. For some further context, this is the distribution, and it looks like an exponential decay kind of thing. The reason it looks like that is because in O's you start at 0, meanwhile in other games your starting elo is usually around the average. Furthermore, a lot of times those ranking systems are also balanced explicitly towards creating that normal distribution. Anyways, in case you want to play around with the data yourself, I made the Google Sheet publicly available. I'm all about transparency, and in case you want to share anything with me, feel free to join my Discord server. Now let's talk about this play again. Is this insane? Well, this player is called BDMC. He currently has over 16,000 PP, which puts him at rank 164 out of 24 million registered players, and he even won the O's World Cup in 2020, which is the biggest annual O's tournament there is. This play, however, happened 9 years ago, at which point he had only about 4,500 PP, putting him at around rank 3,000 out of almost 7 million registered players at the time. Compared to today, however, 4,500 PP puts you basically into 6-digit territory. Still, for as many digits as those are, that is actually among the top 2%. Now, if that's insane, I'll let you be the judge. Some players consider this rank range basically still as beginner level,
especially for someone who is a beginner.
Meanwhile, others consider those players as kinda cracked. The spectrum is all over the place on that one. However, I think one additional variable we can take into account, which might make this debate a bit more interesting, is Playtime. We have access to Playtime in our Google Sheet, and so we can look at how Playtime correlates with PP, aka skill. How long does it take to set that play we just saw? How long does it take to become the average OSU player? Heck, how long does it take to become MRank, the #1 player in the game right now? You're about to find out. But before that, quickly I should mention that there's a lot to consider with this data. For example, it doesn't seem to include players with 0 PP. In fact, it starts at 2, which easily excludes like 2/3 of all registered players. However, I don't want this video to be too long and go too in depth, so if you do care about like the nitty-gritty stuff, I will talk about it in an upcoming stream on Twitch and also share some other interesting findings. In general, I'm planning to stream regularly now, so no matter when you're watching this, I might be live right now, and I would really appreciate it if you drop by and follow me there. So let's talk about Playtime. Playtime is, in my opinion, one of the most understudied aspects of gaming. I mean, I guess we all kind of know that the more you play, the better you're gonna be, and we can visualize this too. However, what we can also see is that there's a massive variation between players. On the one hand, you get players at the very top of the world rankings with barely over 1,000 hours of playtime. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you get players with almost 10 times as much at a skill level which some people would consider bad, and I don't think Oz is an exception to this. So what's going on here? After all, we've always been taught the secret ingredient to improvement is playing more, right? Well, turns out it's not quite so simple. There's a bunch of different factors, impacting how efficiently you're utilizing your playtime, your improvement speed, so to speak. For example, your playtime distribution. It plays a huge role, then the kind of maps you play. If you tend to always push your skill cap, you're probably more likely to improve faster than if you were to only play maps in your comfort zone. Genetics, believe it or not, probably play a huge role as well, though I don't think they're significant in the way that most people think. Now, if only there was a way to, quantify your improvement speed, like a metric for that shown on your profile, for example. Wouldn't it be cool if there was like a browser extension perhaps that's maybe even able to predict your future? Ladies and gentlemen, let me present to you EE, meaning improvement indicator. Now, I know the name is kind of silly, but I thought we already got PP and now EE just fits in with that. So what does it actually look like? Well, you download my extension with a single click. The code is open source, always running locally, there are no API calls or anything like that, and how it works is this. If you remember, we have this beautiful trend line. This represents the expected amount of playtime someone would have at a given PP. Okay, important to mention, I actually created quite a few more trend lines. Notably, their differentiating factor being this RE2 value, which basically means how much the trend line correlates with the data. Now, these are all outdated because these were from before the PP rework, so I did the whole process again. Also including an even bigger sample size. This includes also the top 10,000 ranked player, which is why we see this massive cluster here of players above 9,000 PP. And I think the interesting thing here is that this line, it looks to be almost linear. It's obviously not linear, but it looks to be close to linear, which, well, the implication of that would be that improvement in OS is linear, which is really not something I've expected. Now, maybe my math is wrong here. I'm not a mathematician, to be honest. I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm just putting this out here in case there's something to it, because if there is, then I think this is a very interesting discovery. Anyways, back to the video. The extension now scrapes the PP from any given profile you're on, then inputs it into the function of the trend line, and what it gets is the expected amount of playtime required to reach that PP. Then the last step is to just compare that expected amount of playtime with the actual amount of playtime, and what you get is a value which represents the improvement speed compared to the average person. And last but not least, if you want to know how long it takes to reach a given amount of PP, the extension calculates the expected amount of playtime and then just multiplies it with the inverse of your EE value. For example, if I wanted to beat MREC, it would take me over a year of playtime, which wouldn't just make me number one on the PP leaderboard, but also number one on the playtime leaderboard if there was one. Now, the reason for this is my EE score of just 0.49, which means I improve at roughly 49% the speed of everyone else. That's tough. Now be aware, some people play offline, some people use Scorby 2, some people use other clients, so unless you can know any given player's actual playtime, I would always take this value with a grain of salt. Now, in case you do know, you can just add the missing playtime hours on top of the scraped playtime in the extension, and damn, it looks even worse for me. Let's look at some other players. MREC, he has an EE value of around 1.64, meaning his improvement speed is 64% faster than the average player at that skill level. Akolibet, 1.2, BTMC, 0.63, Ivaxa, 3.1. Damn, now all of these players probably played a lot offline. I don't know how much, but yeah, you can probably start seeing the issue with this. There's also the possibility that the function itself might not be all that accurate, and there's a bunch of more stuff to consider, but again, not everyone cares and it's too much for this video, so we'll talk about it on Twitch. Let's recap. The average player is about 548 PP, which puts him at around rank 1.05 million, and it takes them about 35 hours of playtime to reach it. BTMC's skill in the 9-year-old Big Black Club corresponds to being in the top 2% of players today, and it will take most players about 18 days of playtime to get that good. And last but not least, they say reaching mastery in something takes about 10,000 hours, but it only takes about 4,500 to become MREC. Have a nice rest of your day.